Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Welcome to the 5th episode of The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Here I'm continuing my timeline series where we take step by step, phase by phase towards from the basic idea until you submit your proposal. Now we have reached the idea and concept development. We have been going through the basic idea, so the first time you get an idea to approach EU funding. We have been going through how to identify the funding, and we have been going through reading the call text. So now I will get into, we move into a phase that is a little bit more complex than the earlier stages, because here you move into an area where you need to start using your knowledge, creativity, and teamwork and other resources to build the project concept. So there's a basic difference between the basic idea, and then what it will turn into when you answer to the horizon call. So this is about making sure that the basic idea that you started out with, that is played up against the wall of the call text, but where you fold it out from the actual technology or whatever innovation process or other project idea, collaboration idea you have, that you then fold it into what is requested by the call text. So the bullets I will go through, they are what you need to make a good concept. Then I will try to carve out the elements you need to look at before you can start. Then I will try to give you an idea how to attack this task of forming a full-fledged concept. Then I will look a little bit into how to collaborate with either colleagues or co-partners through workshop meetings. And finally, I will look at the work package structure that you will need to carve out also in this process. So, and finally, in the end, I will address the toughest challenge. I've made a segment of this timeline series. Now, let's get on with it. So, what do you need to make a good project concept out of the basic idea? So first of all, as also mentioned in earlier episodes, you need to cover the call text requirements. So you need to tick the boxes of what they want there. Then you need a clear concept. So it doesn't have to be too weary, or you have to get things straight about how you want to do things, and it needs to be communicated clearly. Then clever angles, you curve balls, so to say, where you build a concept that is not only strong in a strong concept and where you cover the core text, but you also maybe have a little bit of creativity in how you build the structure of how you approach the work. And finally, to make a good concept, this is a process. It's process, think process, and teamwork. You don't make a good few project concepts are made in one person's mind. So you need to have critical mass. You need to have other people that you talk to, that reflect together with. It can be either internally in your organization, in a team, 1-2 colleagues that dig into this, where you have the needed discussions, or if you work with a consultant, to have that critical mass from a knowledgeable consultant, or in a core team, or some of these things in combination. These 4 elements, they are things that you need to make the good concept, in my perception. And from my experience, the 13 years I've been working with these things. Let's move on to what you need to think about before you can start. So you need to identify core partners, or you need to have a team that you can work with. So this is the teamwork, and this is the process part of it. So here I'm assuming that you're writing the proposal yourself. I will, as I move on, continue also having episodes that covers how it is to be a consultant, how they work with things, or if you work from a university point of view. But here we are assuming that you can also be of course, university, but I assume that you write it yourself, that this is your task to sit and work with this. So the best way to deal with unfolding the basic idea into a full-fledged Horizon concept, that is the teamwork. This is the best results that I've had myself, is when I've been sitting together with colleagues or core partners and talking the different elements through. So the best result simply requires critical mass. Now, if you don't work with a team, if you don't have colleagues, if this is a task that you have been assigned to yourself in your organization, then you should at least get the core partners on board that can lift it. And here, it depends on, you might already have them. From the basic idea, you might already have collaboration partners, a university or 1 or 2 collaborative companies. So you might already have them based on the technology or the process that you are trying to carve out into a project. So these would be natural to get on board in this phase, to get on board and to unfold it. So you need to have these meetings. Huh? You need to have them on board, and you need to get them committed to sit down with you, either online or physically, to discuss these things through. Because what the outcome of this process, idea to concept development, you need to enter the place where you can develop a concept note. I will get back to this in more detail in the next episode, where I will exclusively talk about the concept note. The concept note is the project resume, so to say. So this is what you need. You need this both to clear your own head when you start building up the more, putting more flesh to the basic idea. You need to write out in 1-2 pages what this project is about, basic idea, what it solves, and so on. And why it's important, and also up against the core text. Because what you need, first of all, you need it for yourself to realize what it is you're doing, to get the realizations if there are some corners that you didn't think about already. You need to write it out, to both so for yourself, but also, more importantly, actually, is that you need it when you build the consortium. So because you need to send something, the first thing that anybody would ask you when you have identified who to get on board, what kind of partners you need, the first they will ask you is, can you send me some information about what you want to do? And you cannot just write a short email with 5 lines on your ideas of what you thought about. You need to have it a little bit more structured and professionalized to get the right attention to what you want to do and get the right partners on board, because competition is sometimes fierce on getting the right ones on board. So at least this part you need to get right. Okay, so that's clear. That's this point. Before you start, you need someone to talk to. You need to get that team ready so you can form these things. How to attack the process of going from the basic idea to the concept development. I think it's important to be clear that you cannot do this in so many ways, and I'll probably have to make some idea and concept development part 2, 3, 4, and 5 as I move on with the podcast, because you can do this in many, many ways. Now, I will try to explain how I have been working with it, and based on that, what you should be aware of when you start doing this. So proposals, they have 2 main layers, so to say. You have the core idea layer, and you have the horizontal layers of other things surrounding the core project idea, and they should be interconnected smoothly. I will explain shortly. So the technical layer, that would normally be the core project idea. So that's the core idea layer here. So start with the technical layer and your basic idea. You take that, and then you start to put down what actions you need to do to solve that problem, or to develop that technology, to develop that innovation process. Put down on paper, sketching what actions do you need here. And this here, particularly in this part of the process, it's good if you have more people to deal with this. Now, sometimes when I've been doing this, I start making a sketch myself, so there's something to start a discussion from, a detailed critical mass discussion about, so you have a starting baseline. Fact is, you need to do this. You need to put things down. You need to try to imagine what elements of the technology process is needed to reach the end line. These actions you would group in bundles as much as you can with headlines, because what happens here in this part of the process, you're already now starting to making the work package outlines. You get the first drafts when you do this, because when you get these key actions down on paper, then it will form themselves into actions that will be under some headlines. Often you would have, these are just examples, you would have an analytical part or desktop research part, or you need to look maybe into some papers and so on in the beginning. So that would be the first work package. Then you would have maybe some validation, or you would have some where you start to dig into the technology. That would be the next. Then you would have validation and implementation or demonstration part. So here you see you already have some elements that start to form out when you put them down. This will start to form the work package headlines and the actions needed under these headlines to be able to carry this through. This, my experience, it's, as mentioned, sometimes I've been doing this myself, but the best result is for me if I sit with a colleague, just one colleague, no more than that. That's how I've been doing. One colleague where I work, so to talk through how this could work with this particular basic idea. So I talk with that colleague through that, and then we would invite the core group of partners, 1 or 2, 3 partners in for a talk on which elements we got right, which elements we got wrong, which things they see, no, you need to do this or this, or we need to do this or this. Because here you dig into the concrete. It's extremely concrete at this stage. The technology, which concrete actions, which elements, which research, which innovation parts, which development parts do we need to apply here to solve the problem. And that you can only do with knowledgeable people. You might know yourself, but you need someone to play a ball up against to make sure you get it right. When you move in with this process, you start to talk it out have a core group that gives critical feedback, then you start to form things. So the headline boxes you get, you will need to start to put them into a workflow. How it comes naturally when you start to think about it. Where do you start? You start at one end of the timeline, a little bit like I'm doing with this podcast. You start at one end of the timeline. Where do we need to? So what happens when we move on with the technology and so on? What happens there? What happens there? What happens there? So this will slowly clarify the project workflow. It can sometimes be a little tricky if the project idea is complex, or if the call text elements that you play up against forces you to add elements that you didn't think in the first place initially, but you need to add them. So it might make the structure of work and workflow, it might be a little bit more, it might be going around an angle that you didn't perceive in the beginning. So this is also why it's good to be in a team when you work these things out, because it's you need to make sure that there's a logic and that it's clear. This is what I started saying with the good concept. You need to make sure that the call text requirements are there, the concept is clear, and that you need to get these clever angles. So to do this, it's especially if it gets a little complex, then you sometimes need to zoom out and play the devil's advocate and think in the group, maybe we need to do something else. Or you can also pass it by a key player in the core group that has a particularly core role, maybe the common coordinator, to work it through after the first talk, where you then he or her would then pass it by the group after a work through for a second meeting. And this is what I'm talking about, that it's a process. You need to think process. You don't do this in one go. And this will also change as you move on in the process. When you start to get more partners on board, there will be adjustments, there will be elements, or also in the writing process, when you start to reflect, when you write it out, where you might say, wait a minute, this is not possible, we need to do it like this. And then you need to get back into the machine room and work things through. So that's the process. It's very important to say that you in this is a draft. It's always a draft. I always call my concepts when I work them out project. This is a draft concept version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because they are always subject to discussion or to adjustment, and it's an organic structure. It's never set in stone at any time. The only time it's set in stone, that's when you submit the document, more or less. And it's also important as a proposal developer, and you should know this, especially if you're a beginner, that you don't lock yourself in and become inflexible about the concept. You need to perceive the whole project concept as an organic thing that can be adjusted or has to be open for discussions when new partners are coming in. So how do I attack the process? So I already mentioned a little bit how I work when I support stakeholders or clients. So what I normally do, and I've made it a common way of working as a tool, I use PowerPoint simply. I make a VP structure in PowerPoint. I put up the boxes already, so when I sit and talk with my colleague or with the core group, I if it's always online meeting these days. So we sit with the structure in front of us on the screen, and we put into these boxes. These are empty boxes in the beginning, but we fill them in. Work package 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what is needed here, the horizontal, the vertical, how's the flow? We put arrows and so on together to get the first draft where everybody looks at the same thing, and we move things around if need be and so on. This has shown a very powerful tool over the last couple of years where I've done things like this, because then you start to fill in the headlines, you fill in the subtasks under the headline in each box. And what it also does when you work like this is that you immediately have the possibility visually to put in the partner, the core partners already, so where do you fit? And you have also here visually you can put in boxes, empty boxes where you put partner roles in. So we need someone who can do this or this or this, and the core partners might already know in their network contacts and say, okay, we know this company, or we know this research team in Spain, or that we can approach with a strong contact. So it's a very dynamic and organic way of working when you do it like this with the tool, graphical tool that everybody can see where you put things in. And as mentioned, I almost always make the first outline with one colleague with in-depth knowledge about the area that we work with, and then we complement each other and talk through the different elements, because I have a lot of experience of how to set a strong concept, but I'm not an engineer, so I'm sometimes a little short on giving the right critical mass and knowledge, and having the knowledge about the engineering parts if those are technical projects. It's easier for me when those are coordination and support action projects that are collaboration projects. I'm very strong in developing collaborative concepts between organizations and how you can facilitate help and so on. But normally I like to work like this with a colleague, where there's a ping pong about how to build things up. Now, I need to make sure that I also mention the horizontal layer. I mentioned that there's a core, the core idea layer, and the horizontal layer. So the core idea layer, it's, as mentioned, the technical part, so the innovation, the core idea. But in all Horizon projects, you also need to include communication, dissemination, exploitation. You need to include, of course, project management. Sometimes you have also life cycle assessment, life cycle analysis, consumer behavior elements, things that are horizontal, so they go across the technical part, and they are elements of the project that are interacting throughout the full project process with the technical parts. These layers can be visualized in different ways. But normally they are horizontal. Sometimes it depends a little bit on the project concept. Sometimes I've had to integrate the dissemination, communication, exploitation elements in the technical parts because it made sense. But normally normal classical layout would be that it has its own work package. That also, of course, project management coordination is always its own horizontal layer. Consumer behavior, life cycle assessment sometimes can be included in also the technical layers, but it's often a layer that is horizontal because it naturally deals with the full circle of what is needed to deal with. Those elements are not normally not complex to roll out, so to say, to think about. Just what you need to here in this part of the phase. Project management, you have the standard elements of that. The dissemination, communication, exploitation, you need to know what it is. You need to know what communication measures you will take. You need to know how you will make workshops to spread the technologies, and you need to know how to exploit towards the market or research and so on for the partners. But at this stage, you don't need to dig. It's rarely that you need to concept development around it at this stage. This, I would rather say, this is something more towards when you're in the writing process, that you can start to build some nice concepts around how to communicate around the technology and how to get connected to groups throughout Europe or companies or associations that could spread the results. So it's at this stage, you just need to make sure that they're there and that they fit into the total holistic concept. Yeah, let's move on to the next element, the next bullet point here. So I will get back to this because it's the truth is that it has taken me a weekend, a week and a half to get my head around how to present this. But I'm not. This is what I said. I think I need to have just add episodes as I move on to this, because there are so many ways you can approach this, and also when I start having guests on board that do things in a different way, I think the most important thing is that it starts to give some input to you who sits out there and work with this, and that it has a value that you can start to get your head around how to approach this. Something that gives you an idea of how you can do it. Also, I think one of the things that tricked me a little bit on how to approach it is both the who you are. Who are you? Are you a company, or are you a university professor, or are you a consultant, or are you? It matters a lot in terms of how to attack this, what your baseline is, where you come from. Here, there's a little bit of methodology. So I've tried to approach it that way to give you an idea. And those will have different angles depending on where you stand, which kind of organization you work for. Also, a lot of what I've just said depends on how developed the project idea is. Because it might be very developed where you don't have to do a lot of things. You might not have to do an early workshop with the partners, or you might not have to. You might actually be able to carve these things out yourself. It depends a lot on the call text and so on. Here, I've given you an insight into how I work with these things, and they should be applicable to a lot of the processes towards the Horizon Europe Pillar 2 calls. My next bullet, that's on a workshop with core partners. And I think actually I covered it a little bit already. It's just to give you an idea of how you can work with these things, because this is how I often work. It's seen that I get good results. So it is good in the beginning if it's not just yourself, or if you have a group of partners that are connected. Because in this phase, the first thing you need to do, you need to clearly define who wants to do what and agree on the project details. This is good in an early group to already start getting the details down on paper on who does what, and get a common understanding of where you want to go. It's not just enough that you think that you know where you want to go, have an idea of where this needs to go. You need to agree in the core group, because you need them badly when it gets hairy in the work process when you start to develop the proposal. So you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And a workshop where you discuss this is just a basic good tool. Call it a workshop, call it a meeting, whatever you want to call it. Sit down around a virtual table and dig into to make sure that everybody has a common understanding of where you want to go. And if you don't agree, then find out how to approach that. First of all, the above tool that I just mentioned, the VP structure tool that I'm using, can help you. And if you have made a first draft, that I said that I sometimes do. So if you have a first draft, then it will be like a canvas discussion where you go through step by step the tasks and subtasks, adjusting and add elements according to where the discussion goes. So having a canvas, because this is basically what it is, this VP structure tool, and the way that I work with it. You put it down on the virtual screen there, and then you sit together and put virtual post-its on. That should be like that. That should be like that. That should be like that. Maybe we do it like this. Maybe we move this here. Maybe we move this there. So I think the tricky part here is to keep a left eye on the call text, so you don't wander off the track. Because I've seen this many times, both with myself, because it's a psychological common way that when you sit with a subject and you work with it and you talk through it, then you sometimes wander down things that think this. Oh yeah, then we add this, and that was clever. Then we do this, but then you might be in opposition to some elements that the commission wants you to do it. I tried this many times, that you talk your way through with core partners, and you think that you have a good structure, but then you remind yourself of looking at the call text and just checking, and then wait a minute, this is opposite of what how the commission wants us to approach this subject. It's a flag. Be aware of it. Second part here is second part of such a workshop. So there you have the discussion to go through the concepts as it falls out on a project structure, on the content. So that's the first element you need to cover. The second part is to run through which kind of partners you need for the work that needs to be done. Normally, actually, it runs like this. So you talk content and then you talk partners afterwards. Rarely you mix it up. So it fits quite well how I outlined it here. I will have an episode dedicated to partner search and value chain definition, but this starts here. I will, as mentioned, we'll get back to it in one of the next episodes. Oh, it starts already here because you need to get the roles and maybe concrete partner candidates on the table. So the earlier you can define the partners you need and reach out and start the dialogue with the partners, the better. Because I tell you, this is what most proposals fall towards the deadline, because the partner value chain is not finalized. That's the from experience. It's not scientific, it's from experience and from what I know throughout my colleagues and all the organizations I work for. It's the partner value chain where you end up not being able to cover one or two holes in the project. That means it falls. It's the partner value chain that is not being solid, that makes partners leave and say, we don't believe we can do this before deadline, and so on and so forth. That single part of the process with getting the partners and the right partners on board, that is vital for your successful proposal. And this part of the process is your groundwork for that, because when you have the good concept, when you have a clear concept, clever angles, well worked through up against call text, nice structure, that's what's going to get your quality partners on board. So you need to do this work, and you need to do it good. So already at this stage, start to plot them in, the roles needed, and if you have them, possible candidates, or even candidates that is a contact to. At the end of such a workshop or meeting, you should have the input you need to develop the project structure and building blocks to write a consistent concept note. Moving towards the end of this episode, just talking a little bit about the next element before talking about the toughest challenge, the work package structure. So I think I have covered it, but you just need to be aware of, it's going to help you a lot with the concept note description. So the combination of having talked this through with the group or in your team. So you have the structure, and then you also have the visual structure. So because the work package structure, they will be the blocks with headlines and sub-areas defined above, and they will be the blocks that define your project. So you need to work a little bit with arrows, connection between the work package blocks. Also after the meeting, so you have this is a canvas discussion where you have a lot of things on the table where you agree, but then you need to maybe work things through to make sure that it has a solid structure, not just fluffy things that you might have talked through. And you might need to have some ping pong with the core group when you sit and make this final first draft. It can take time, but it is a solid tool when you have the draft ready. Promise you. And as mentioned, you can both use it for the content development and for the partner search and consortium build-up. It is a very strong tool, visual PowerPoint, work package structure / canvas, because you get them highlighted visually and textual in boxes and the flow to get a solid understanding yourself, but also the ones that you are trying to attach to the process. The visual identity of what you want to do, it's very important for the first impression that the possible partners will get when they get the information package you will send out. It's not just a concept note, written concept note. You need to have some sort of visual that makes it obvious that this is a clear, strong, solid concept. Moving towards the end, the toughest challenge. The toughest challenge, probably you have many challenges. So the toughest one, the toughest challenge is probably to get your head around the process itself, plus how to get structured and shaping it up. When you have the core partners, when you have it done, when you have them in, when you have prepared yourself well in which points to go through vis-a-vis the technology elements you want to deal with, then when the talk goes, it starts to materialize. I've done this many times before ending up in a place where I'm very comfortable with it. But it's important. The toughest thing is to start being comfortable with working with stepping on the ice, so to say, and checking if it's holding as you start to build up the structure and so on. The best advice I can give you is to try to be as structured as possible and use the tools. You can even invent tools yourself. If PowerPoint is not to your liking, do something else in a visual graphic elements that you can build this up. The most important thing is that you get structured around it. That's also going to help. If it's structured from the beginning, it's also going to help you being structured when it starts to get hairy in the writing process, because it can be quite chaotic. I think it's important to say here that this is where winners start to be isolated from losers. This is the part of the process where the proposals that win funding is now. Because the good holistic project concepts, they can outshine proposals where the technical part is too heavy. So the balance between the technical part and the holistic proposal structure with a nice elements of LCA, of consumer behavior elements, so on and so forth, that you see start to form a holistic project that is not just a technical project plus a little bit of the horizontal elements. That any evaluator will see right through this and will always pick the one that can juggle with the technical elements and make these technical elements shine and come out into the world instead of just for the partners. This is what the horizontal layers do. Further, this part of the process is extremely important to be able to attract partners, as I mentioned. If you fail in this part of the process to make it a clear concept, a clear, a nice angle, if you fail here, it's going to be more difficult for you to attract partners. If you succeed in making a strong concept, combining your technical knowledge maybe with clever angles, then it's going to be easier for you to get also the very difficult partners to get on board that you very much like, because if they see this is a possible winner because of the strength and the cleverness of the approach. I've seen it and I've tried it myself, developing clever concepts where partners say this is where we want to go, this is a good idea, this is a nice way of approaching this problem. So the way that the input from the core partners shaped is important to make it solid. Now, that's the end of this 5th episode on idea and concept development. Next episode, I will have a talk. I will have a talk with myself. Yeah, I will go through how to develop a concept note. The concept note development. It's it has some specific elements that is good to get some in. But you can do concept notes in many different ways. But I will try to give you an idea what should mainly be in there. for you to make a nice thing that you can attract partners with. So very happy for anybody who have listened here to the end. Thank you for that. Happy to build up this concept still. I'm looking very much forward to keep pushing on with recording episodes, and hope to have you hooked onto the next episode. Bye. I have created a website for this initiative. Check it out at thegrand.eu. Go and subscribe to this podcast and browse around to check out how the initiative is unfolding. When you subscribe, you will get access to the Grand LinkedIn group, which is where the interaction is going on between you, dear listeners, and me. Thanks for listening to the end, and looking so very much forward to build this up for you. Get the Grand! The Grand. You have been listening to The Grand, the EU funding podcast.